unlucky to face a historical prejudice. That is why, in the beginning of her narration, she wonders where these women are in history today. In the light of this, a section was devoted to analyze the article La femme dans la cité, Women in the City, a series of essays written by Paulette Nardal between the years 1945 and 1951. Women in the City gave opportunity to the Martinican women to abandon her former restrictive role in society that shrinks her, the female, as mothers and housewives to permit them to be open to the public life. By doing so, the journal paved the way for the Martinican women to get access to the right to vote in 1944. Nardal's conception of gender is that women and men can both excel in different areas by the biology and psychology. For the female contribution of the movement, Discours sur le colonialisme, Discourse on Colonialism, by M. Césaire was analyzed to better understand what is civilization and humanism in the Western conception. Césaire was in fact able to expose European civilization and humanism when he asserted, a civilization that proves incapable of solving the problems it creates is a decadent civilization. A civilization that chooses to close its eyes to its most crucial problems is a stricken civilization. A civilization that uses its principles for trickery and deceit is a dying civilization. Then the question remains for Césaire how that civilization could be extended to other nations. This is a question mark. Fanon intervenes in the debate by dealing with the black subconscious. That is to say, a psychoanalytical approach to study the black inferiority complex towards the white. Fanon deals with the notion of racism with impartiality. For him, being black or white does not matter, and racism must be condemned in whatever form or side it might take or emerge from. That is to say, when he said, in the following quotation, "We shall have no mercy for the former governors, the former missionaries. To us, the man who adores the Negro is as sick as the man who abominates him. Conversely, the black man who wants to turn his race white is as miserable as he who preaches hatred for the whites." However painful it might be for me to accept this conclusion, I am obliged to say that for the black man there is only one destiny, and it is white. If there is an inferiority complex, it is the outcome of a double process. Primarily economic, subsequently the internalization, or better, the epidermalization of the inferiority complex. The end of quote. The inferiority complex of the black subject is the result of the double process for Fanon. On the one hand, the economy, and on the other hand, and most importantly for Fanon, the subsequent result of internalization, or as he says, better to call it epidermalization. Having said so, some questions bump into the reader's mind, that is, how the Negro can do without having always to justify himself before the white man. In other words, how resistance can be built in a way that enables the black subject to live outside the scope of the white man and think as a free agent. For Fanon, the one destiny that the black has is to go white. Does it mean that the black man is doomed to be white? That's a rhetorical question. This argument does also refute Michel Foucault's notion of resistance. In fact, the Foucauldian model tells us that wherever there is power, there is resistance. Of course, Foucault is important and relevant to mention here because at least he gives us the hope to think about a way in which resistance can be built. However, one still needs to discover on which level this resistance is being articulated. Let us also draw our attention to the notion of self and other by looking at the binary opposition between the white man and the black man. Indeed, in the same chapter, Fanon informs us that, in fact, the fact of juxtaposing the white and the black races created a massive psycho-existential complex. Thus, if there is a psycho-existential complex, we can no longer talk about power as monodirectional. Resistance might occur in the psyche of the colonized because, theoretically speaking, the white colonizer needs always the black indigenous to confirm his power and become superior. In other words, without the other, we cannot talk about the self, or the self cannot be the self. This research paper allowed me to discover some interesting issues in the massacres that took place in the French colonial era that history tends to forget. As a case in point, Thiaroye 44 does epitomize the horrible act inflicted to les tirailleurs sénégalais. Senghor, in his part, did not hesitate to devote an entire poem to this event. Interestingly enough, Thiaroye 44 was not the only historical record in the French colonial massacres. In fact, as a matter of fact, the journalist and historian Yves Benoit told us in his finding that in Casablanca, Morocco, the French army massacred dozens and thousands of men and women, and the only thing they did was for having asked more rights, liberty, and independence. This historical record needs surely to be further documented because it belongs to the history of France, which is that policy in its colonies, and they do not want to talk about them or even sometimes deny it at all. As far as the approach adopted in this dissertation is concerned, my thesis deals with colonialism and post-colonialism as main focuses. Then it resorts to a gender reading of Negritude movement in order to rehabilitate the female memories in the light of the contributions they brought to the movement. Therefore, my analysis of the topic compels me to be eclectic in approaching these different issues. Indeed, I recalled from time to time other approaches or authors from different backgrounds in order to better understand and analyze the subject. As a case in point, a psychoanalytical attempt was made to analyze the 2 chapters from the book Black Skin, White Mask from Frantz Fanon. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, thank you very much, Mamadou, for this interesting presentation about the paper, and I found that you have really summarized the most important issues discussed in your paper. I would like also to thank, this is something I'd like to thank all my students and our students, especially those also whom you call sub-Saharan, you know what I mean, yeah, students or community who have come here, you are at home. Good. Well, I could have done that in French, you know what I mean. Yeah. But, so, vous êtes les bienvenus ici. Je m'adresse aux étudiants de la communauté. Je n'aime pas d'ailleurs cette expression de la communauté africaine, mais les étudiants qui viennent d'autres pays africains qui sont ici, vous êtes les bienvenus et je vous remercie. Donc, I have been for different reasons, to be honest, for personal and for professor that knows that. For many years, I have been very much interested in Africa and in African students, and I worked with them for a long time because of personal and reasons. Because I think that the relationship, once again, being myself kind of torn between many cultures and many countries, I found that it's interesting, by the way, to go to the roots of this, one of the roots of the civilization of Morocco. Of course, it is Africa, and we forget many times that Africa is, or Morocco is in Africa, at least geographically speaking, you know what I mean. If not ideologically, it is, you know what I mean. It is in Africa, and this is something. And this paper, one of the merits of this paper is this idea of, when we read it, we started, to kind of reconsider many things and to have an idea about the history, you know what I mean, which we don't know. The history which I met, if you like, when I was very young. And I remember one of the first books I read, it was by Leopold Sédar Senghor, Nuit Africaine. And I remember, Nuit Africaine. And that book, marked me a lot, That book, Nuit Africaine, par Leopold Sédar Senghor, it pushed me to think and to read about Africa and African roots and things. And of course, when I went abroad, I had the chance to meet many people, especially from Martinique, La Guyane, and others, and who gave me many important information concerning, especially somebody whom I do respect a lot. That means Aimé Césaire, who is now l'Académie Française in France. Of course, when we talk about the relationships, of course, between Morocco and Africa, they are very historical. I'm not, doing some kind of discrimination, but Moroccans and Senegalese, they are very close. You know what I mean? It's a close civilization. It's not colonialism, I'm not talking about colonialism, but you feel at home. Whereas the relationship between, if you like, Morocco, Senegal, and France is problematic even today because of, once again, the problem of France. France's country, or the Republic of France, is built on the idea, this idea of, kind of superiority, what I mean, which up to now, and also the idea of one culture, whereas when we see what is happening in reality in France, we find that it is a multicultural society. You know what I mean? But it doesn't want to accept this because of, probably Colonial reason in which it still stupidly believes in. The text written by, I read it many times, and of course, as in any kind of work, it has many shortcomings and it has many flaws. But I think that one of the most important things is, first of all, it is a text, or it is a paper which deals with something we don't talk about a lot in academia, I'm not talking about academia in the university, but at least in Morocco, is the idea of negritude. Little work is given to negritude. We don't know even negritude, you know what I mean? And this is something, in the beginning, when I talked with Mamadou, I said, this is an interesting point, you know what I mean? That's negritude, you have at least this is a kind of invitation of Moroccan, you know what I mean? To know what negritude means, to know what is, to discover this problem of negritude and this issue of negritude of Berlin. One, and to make people sound like Césaire or like Sédar Senghor known, you know what I mean here, because very often we know black Americans, we know black Africans, but we don't know, those of the Martinique, La Guyane, the ex-colonies, of France. We don't know. We don't have a kind of knowledge about that. So it is a question, of course, it is highly informative, this work. The other point is the idea of we talked about the idea of rewriting history, or at least making visible, you know what I mean, and invisible. We know that France hasn't done so, and we know that recently we started, you know what I mean, in France to give some kind of credit to those les tirailleurs sénégalais. But when how many tirailleurs sénégalais do we have here? So the majority of that, you know what I mean, died. And this is the case of the Goum in Morocco, you know what I mean here. And those people, the colonists who participated in the wars, you know, against Germany with France. So these are the invisible, or it's not the invisible, the forgotten, I would call them the forgotten. And the text, of course, is an attempt to at least give them some kind of, if not rehabilitation, at least to talk about them and to say that they exist and they played an important part in the history of France, of course. The text also is highly informative in the sense of that it gives us an idea about the Harlem Renaissance, you know what I mean here, which is an important, you know what I mean here, point in the Negritude movement. We saw how things, you know what I mean here, began, that it's a kind of a historical account, you know what I mean here, of this movement. There is also this idea of talking about past, of course, and the future of Negritude. This is one of my questions, of course, at the end. Of course, the problem also, even today, we feel that there is a kind of failure, the Negritude movement, if its aim is to, as you said in something which I like, is discours sur le colonialisme par Aimé Césaire, it's a question